What's up, advocates? And welcome to the first episode of the commercial claims, what am I saying? Of the Claims Game podcast. I'm so used to saying commercial claims show. It's the Claims Game podcast. And welcome to episode number 1. Super excited about this. Today's date is, I don't know, it's a Wednesday, and we're finally getting things kicked off. If you follow all of our stuff, I hope that you know that we officially have our website. Our website is up and it is live. It is www.commercialclaimsadvocate.com, and it's where you could find everything that you need, all of it. You could find all of our videos, our blog posts. You could find this podcast that you're about to listen to, and you could find all kinds of information. And get ready, people. Get ready. We've got some books. We got some courses. We got all kinds of stuff coming your way, and I think you're going to enjoy it. And today, we have a very special guest. Of course, it's the first episode of the podcast, so we had to make sure that we got a very special guest, and that is someone that I've known for a very long time, probably about 10 years already, when I had already been sick and tired of using or referring different insurance attorneys because my claim would get lost and it would just get lost in the shuffle, and 3 years later, the claim would finally get paid, or I'd call the office of whatever attorney my claim was with, and I couldn't get a hold of anybody, and nobody knew what was going on. I finally got up in my networking chapter and I said, I need an attorney I could work with. I was referred to Mr. David Farber of the Farber Law Firm, and he is who I'm interviewing today. I sat with him and I told him right off the bat, and I said, listen, I'm just looking for somebody that I can count on. I'm looking for somebody that when I give them my claim or when they take over my claim, that it's not going to get lost in the shuffle, and that I'm going to be able to get questions answered, and just get things moving. And he said that he would be that guy. And it's grown into a pretty nice, solid, positive relationship. And that's why I'm very happy to have him on the first episode. He's one of the smartest people that I know. And I thought it would be great, especially now with this COVID. I mean, we talk about all kinds of stuff. We talk about what public adjusters must do throughout the claim to make sure that not only do they get paid faster, but if it does go to litigation, that it's all wrapped up in a bow for the attorney to really knock it out of the park. We talk about what a CRN is, a civil remedy notice. I know I've gotten a lot of questions about that. We talked about the rules behind proof of loss and the POL, and how many days we have to submit it, and how soon we should submit it, and when we should submit it, and so on and so forth. We talk about some new law that is going on because of COVID. We do go over the famous conversation now, which is the loss of business income to commercial businesses now that the COVID-19 is hitting, and if we should file claims and where we're at with the status of that. So that's an interesting conversation. We talk about water damage exclusions and water damage limits. So we've got a lot of stuff that we talk about throughout the entire podcast that I think you guys are going to get a lot out of. On top of that, in my opinion, it's a good conversation. We have a good time. I think you'll enjoy it. So please, I want to welcome David Farber of the Farber Law Firm. You could find him at www.thefarberlawfirm.com. You could also reach him by email at info@thefarberlawfirm.com. And you could call him directly at his office. It's 305-774-0134. One thing I could say about David is that if you call him, you're going to speak with him. You're not going to just speak with some other people. And he will be there for you to answer any of your questions. So I hope that you could enjoy this podcast that we have today, and it's with David Farber, and enjoy the first episode of the Claims Game podcast.
Welcome to the Claims Game podcast with Perri. Get all the tips you need from insurance claim advocates and professionals, and grow your public adjusting career to the next level. And now the commercial claims advocate, Perri.
That's true. So I've already done the introduction, is what you don't know. And we're talking to David Farber, insurance attorney, badass insurance attorney mogul, king of the insurance claim industry. David, thank you for coming on with me for the first episode. I'm interviewing you because I wanted to make sure that I interviewed somebody that I felt comfortable with. You bring the whole package, because not only do I feel comfortable with you, but you are an extremely experienced attorney. You've been doing this for a long time, which I'm sure we'll get into. And I feel that we could have a nice, cool, comfortable conversation about the insurance claim game and all the crap that we're dealing with now with Corona and so on and so forth. So tell us a little bit about yourself, my friend.
Well, first of all, thank you, Vince, for having me. I appreciate it. Very impressed by the audience that you've garnered in such a short amount of time. It speaks volumes for your commitment to the profession, and a testament to your skill and knowledge. And I'm also honored, of course, to be your first guest. Everyone's got to have a first, right?
That's right.
So a little bit about me. My name is David Farber. I've been practicing a little over 20 years. The first part of my practice, I was running the first party property division of one of the largest insurance defense firms in Florida. Some call it the Evil Access. Other people call it Cole Scott Gassane. It was a good place to learn, get a lot of knowledge and skill. There's a lot of good lawyers there. They are fighting a lot of these claims that you guys are filing, and defending those actions in litigation. After I worked with Cole Scott Gassane for a period of time, I then joined a preeminent plaintiff's law firm by the name of Kelly Ustall, which is up in Broward, that does catastrophic personal injury and large insurance claims. And then I had the good fortune of going out on my own a little over 11 or so years ago, and have been honored to be able to take the type of clients and cases that I want to work on, so as to bring justice and to otherwise help speak up for the little guy. That's
right around the time we met.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah, it's been a long time, Vince.
I remember it was about 10 years ago. And I remember B&I, Woody Lippincott, said, hey, I was like, I remember, because I'm sure a lot of other public adjusters can attest who've been doing this for a while. It's hard to find good attorneys to work with. I mean, it just is what it is. A lot of attorneys, a lot of what happens, very well known in this industry, is you send a file to an attorney takes one of the files, and it just gets lost. It just gets lost forever. And I just remember being so annoyed. I had been doing this for probably just about 2 years or so. It wasn't that long. And I just remember getting up in the B&I meeting and just saying, I need an attorney that I can trust. I need an attorney that I could, work with. And I don't want my files to be submitted and they just get lost, because it happens so often. And I get a lot of messages all the time here on even social media and stuff. They're just like, how do you find a good attorney? How do you find a good attorney? Because I mean, it is what it is. It's part of the process. I know it does take years. But I think what separates you, at least for me, is, if I have a question about a policy, if I have a question and I'm in front of I'm in a claim and I'm not really sure, what's going on or what the policy really says, or is there a limit here or is there not? I think it's very important for all attorneys to be accessible, because man, accessibility is number one,
It's funny that you say that. I actually believe those were probably the first words you stated to me when we first met, which is something along the lines of, hey man, if you can't be responsive and you're not going to do the job that I otherwise need you to do, you're not the right guy for me. in so many words. And although I'm sure it was a lot nicer back then. But no, I mean, it's imperative that you are working hand in hand with somebody that you know and that you trust. You're not serving your client the best that you possibly can. And every attorney that you work with on some level should be able to answer whatever question that you may have about a policy, about an issue, even if they don't take the case. It's imperative for you to be able to get the best result for your client. And it's more importantly necessary for an attorney, should that case come to him or her, and they need to know what happened previously so as to be able to assess the validity of it going forward. In order for us to be able to understand a claim and present the claim, it needs to be handled correctly from the outset. And that's why when it's being handled by a public adjuster who knows what they're doing and can present the best possible claim, it makes our job so much easier. So if people are looking for an attorney to work with, make sure it's somebody who's willing to take the time to be invested both in the public adjuster and the practice of law, and ultimately the betterment of the insurance world, and have the client's best interests at heart. we need to, on some level, band together to make sure that the insurance companies aren't taking advantage of us, either be a public adjuster, a client, or an attorney. And the best way that we can do that is to make sure that when we're putting forth a case, that it's the strongest case possible. And the only way to do that is to have great relations.
Yeah, and I know one thing. First, let me get to one thing first. Is I know I've told you this before, but honestly, part of my goal throughout the claims process is, and I've told you this, like I said, but is to stay away from litigation, because it's unfortunate, but the process of litigation, it takes time. And the longer it takes for my client to get paid, the longer it takes for me to get paid, right? So it's something that I've always tried to, I try to avoid it. But one thing that I will say that you have helped me with tremendously is really just that, what you're talking about, which is just making sure that all your ducks are in a row throughout the claims process. Are you following up with the insurance company at least on a weekly or bi-weekly basis? Because here in Florida, we've got that 14-day thing where if they don't respond within 14 days, it doesn't look so good with the insurance company. I don't know the actual legal terms for it. I'm sure you know that, but it's good to stay on their case, follow up often. And then in the case that it is severely underpaid or it is denied, when you get the case, I mean, you've got the whole thing pretty much like on a silver platter, right? It's sort of, I mean, obviously it's not necessarily a slam dunk or anything, but it's going to help your case tremendously.
Well, sure. It certainly does. I mean, but there's a lot to be said for the strength of the case based upon what a public adjuster does or doesn't do,
right?
Before it comes to me. And the goal would be, if possible, that all cases get resolved without the need for you or for me. I mean, it's nice that we're in a business to make money and help people, but at the same time, if insurance companies were doing what they were supposed to do, they wouldn't need us. But we've taken cases, where they said they fell below the deductible and turned them into millions of dollars in some cases. And it's not because the insurance company made a mistake. It's because the insurance company has a bottom line. And ultimately, any dollar that they pay you is one less dollar that they have in their bank to potentially earn interest on. It's an unfortunate fact of life, and they're in the business of making money as well. Now, I'm not saying all insurance companies are bad. There are certainly insurance companies that are doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing. But it's obviously been my experience that when a client is represented by a public adjuster or an attorney or both, that they're going to get the absolute best result and maximize the value of their claim so that they can put their home or commercial property back together.
Yeah, and believe it or not, I do actually also think that they do have sometimes the client's or the insurer's best interest at heart. I just think that it's gotten to a point now, especially I'd say since around 92, since Andrew and stuff, where they've almost created their own like monster of all these just underpaid claims, and they just fight everything tooth and nail, which is another thing that never really made sense to me. Is I'll tell these adjusters sometimes where I've got just solid case, it is what it is, easy claim, and they're giving me a hard time about it. And I'm like, are you really going to give me a hard time about it when you could just pay this claim now and save more money than you would if you're going to fight me on it now? Instead of paying me, let's say $10,000 now, you're going to have to pay 50 or 100 if we take it to litigation. So like, why? I never understood that, but I think it's just, they sort of created somewhat of a monster, especially since Andrew.
Well, they did it to themselves on some level, because back in Andrew days, when Andrew decimated South Florida, the adjusters would come out and they'd actually have a checkbook, and they would literally write the check right then and there. And they'd say, listen, if you need more, just give me a call and we'll give you more. And that's how it was. And as time went on, and people started filing, I guess, more cases, or insurance companies started looking at the bottom line a lot more and potentially putting their profits over people. Now it was a question of, did you start that fire? Did you cause that hurricane?
Did you cause that hurricane?
Yeah. How do you know that tornado wasn't just, some science project that you were running in your garage? I mean, it's gotten to the point of asinine, when if they really had more customer support and more trust in the adjuster who's coming out and evaluating the claim, many of these claims might not get to where they are. But unfortunately, the more norm is to delay, deny, and defend their position so as to potentially save them money. But in some respects, it doesn't really save them much, because in the end, like you said, they're going to end up paying both the client more money and potentially pay additional attorney's fees and costs. And they're also going to have to pay their own attorney. So what they could have gotten out for substantially less, now they're paying potentially double, triple, or even quadruple what they could have gotten out far earlier.
Tell me about that real quick for the new public adjusters, attorney fees and costs. I think that's a question that I get from clients all the time. Oh my goodness, we're going to sign up with an attorney, but how much is it going to cost me? How much do I have to pay the attorney? So on and so forth. And I guess if you could explain that a little bit, and also I could also give some tips on how to sort of explain it to the client too, though.
Sure. There's a lot of misinformation out there about attorney's fees and costs and what an attorney will do or won't do in terms of charging the client. In Florida, and this is not true in all states, we have a statute which allows for us to potentially get additional attorney's fees and costs on top of the indemnity payment. We're only entitled to obtain additional attorney's fees and costs once the case is in litigation, and either the insurance company confesses liability or we ultimately get a judgment which results in a successful result for our client, and then we have a attorney fee hearing which allows for the court to potentially award attorney's fees. Now the insurance companies know that every claim that gets filed in the state of Florida is going to have an element of attorney's fees and costs. So it's my goal, and I presume most other attorneys' goal, to try and get the additional attorney's fees and costs paid for by the insurance company directly. So in a scenario where a public adjuster is also representing an insured as well as an attorney, the goal is for the indemnity payment to be what it would be as though the public adjuster was able to hit the ball out of the park, and for the public adjuster to get his percentage based upon that amount, and for the attorney to be able to get the additional attorney's fees and costs on top of that claim settlement amount. That is the ideal structure that exists out there. And of course, if you have a fair, reasonable, and honorable attorney who's taking their client's interests ahead of their own, the goal would make sure that when they talk to their client, they set up reasonable expectations as to what it is that they may be able to recover, and ultimately have a frank conversation as to what they will be receiving as their net amount, meaning after the public adjuster is paid, after water mitigation may be paid, after an attorney may be paid, so that you have a happy client when the case is over. Because the worst thing that you could potentially have starting out as a new public adjuster or at any point in time in your career is having somebody who is disappointed in the work that you're providing, the service that you're providing, or the result that you secured for them. So I always find it important to empower my clients to make sure that they know what the net amount is that they're going to receive before their hand goes on the dotted line to sign a release.
Okay, let me simplify this a little bit. Is it okay for me to tell a client that the attorney fees and costs are separate from the settlement that they're going to be getting? Am I okay to say something like that, or?
Well, what you advise a client, it would potentially be problematic from the standpoint of
can't act as a lawyer.
The relationship between an attorney and his client is between the attorney and his client. So, what you decide to say to your client, you also
before going to litigation.
But even before going to litigation, you as a public adjuster should always be maintaining that sort of air of, I do public adjusting, and if we have to go to the next stage, that being an attorney, the attorney will explain to you how the attorney's fees work. Now, you can, of course, say in any sense, which isn't giving legal advice, that you should know that there is an attorney's fee statute, and exactly as I just explained it, which is the attorney is going to do his best to make sure that he gets his fees and costs paid on top of any settlement that you ultimately receive. So if you want to say it how you want to say it, you say it however you want. I'm just telling you is that I would remind you and any public adjuster watching this, don't ever give legal advice. Don't ever try and interpret a lawyer's contract. Don't ever presume that you know what the lawyer is going to do or not going to do, because you don't want to get yourself into a situation where at the end of the day, if a lawyer and a client has some sort of disagreement or problem, then they come back to you and they say, hey, Vince, you told me this, that, or the other thing. You don't want to get involved in that.
Listen, I know we're not allowed to act as lawyers and we're not allowed to give attorney advice, but I'd be lying if I told you that I wasn't compared to an attorney in the past.
I don't doubt it.
They're like, wait, so you're like a lawyer, and I have to be, no, I'm not a lawyer, because I actually tried to take that LSAT once and I failed miserably, and I told myself, hell no, I ain't doing that. Not for me.
Yeah, people don't realize though what we actually do once we get a file and how many moving parts there really are to be able to bring someone a successful result. It can be mind-boggling, and sometimes just the smallest of issue can be the biggest problem in the world, or alternatively, what you think is the biggest problem in the world really turns out to be something very minor, and you really don't know.
What are some of the reasons why it takes so damn long?
Well, I mean, there's a couple reasons, in the sense that, the Florida has this 90-day prompt payment statute, and the insurance companies and some plaintiffs' lawyers, and certainly the defense bar, are of the opinion that with that 90-day prompt payment, if you can call 90 days prompt, I don't,
seriously,
but some people might, that they have that much time to necessarily investigate a claim and make a coverage decision. But actually what that statute says is that they actually have to pay or deny. So they don't just get to tell you on the 90th day we're accepting coverage. They actually have to pay or deny. And if they don't accept coverage within those 90 days and pay or deny, obviously if they pay, it might resolve their penalty. And if they deny, it might also lead to the penalty of interest. So
is this just Florida, David, or is this nationwide, this 90-day thing?
Well, every state has their own specific laws and rules, and some are better and some are worse. There are bad faith provisions that exist within insurance statutes. In our Florida, it's I believe 624.155, which talks about the bad faith that's associated with it. Yeah.
Hold on, I got to write this down. 624.
Well, now I'm going to have to double check, but I'm pretty sure. But what we do is...
Oh, and I will say quickly that David Farber is also licensed in the state of Texas.
And soon to be New York, actually.
How about that? All right, sorry, go ahead. 624 what?
And in Texas, it's called the Stowers decision, which talks about bad faith. And in Florida, it's statutory, and it's 624.155. And that is where you have to file a civil remedy notice of insurer violation to advise the insurance company that whatever practice it's presently employing is potentially bad faith, based upon its investigation, based upon its claims handling, based upon its analysis. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons based upon its delay. There can be a whole host of reasons.
The famous CRN, civil remedy notice. Explain exactly what is it. That's just like a letter that is sent. That's not, because that's not a lawsuit, correct? No. That's just like a warning, right?
Well, it's more than that, because it's very serious in the sense that it is a filing that gets filed with the Department of Financial Services. So it's kind of a ding against the insurance company. Now, I don't know what internally the Department of Financial Services does with the document or not once it receives it. However, it is online for anybody to want to go and review it. So if you wanted to, you could create an account and you could go see what is SafePoint or what is Citizens or what are other lawyers saying about some of their practices. You can search for my name. You can see.
You can see all the filed CRNs and stuff.
Yeah, and you can see their responses, and it's quite interesting.
Huh? Where's that?
I can give you the actual URL when the podcast is over, and you can post it when you put your links in.
Interesting.
And I mean, the idea is that public adjusters, although the verdict is sort of out on this as to whether or not they can, as a public adjuster, file a civil remedy notice on behalf of a client, but certainly an attorney can, and it can predate the lawsuit, meaning that a civil remedy notice is a prerequisite to be able to bring what they call a bad faith lawsuit at some point in time, when you prove that there's coverage, liability, as well as damages. Once that gets established, you can potentially have a secondary case where you say that because the insurance company didn't do what it was supposed to do in either a reasonable amount of time, or it had certain bottom line considerations as opposed to client considerations, or many, many other facets, you can actually sue the insurance company for what would otherwise be considered punitive damages to really maximize the entitlement of an insured for the insurance company's bad faith. And how it's supposed to work is, once the civil remedy notice is filed, we get a copy of it, and we're required to send it to the insurance company. And then the insurance company has 60 days, and the law says, to cure the violation, which is always interesting, because what are they going to do? And usually within the 60-day time frame, it says that, depending on what the attorney wants, mine is usually review the entire estimate that's been provided by the public adjuster or a general contractor, and otherwise pay, minus prior payments and deductible, all the amounts owed, as well as agree to additional attorney's fees and costs. So now the insurance company is on a time clock, in the sense that if they don't cure that violation within 60 days, they could potentially be hit with a bad faith lawsuit after the initial lawsuit, which could subject them to punitive damages. And that is a very big claim that could be hit against an insurance company, far more than an indemnity payment would otherwise be paid for under the insurance policy. It's called extra contractual damages.
Gotcha. And how do they usually respond to some of these CRNs? Do they I'm sure they try to, they have to respond. So I'm sure they respond with some lowball offer or something like that. Is that more often the case?
No, and that's another thing that I find to be curious. But really what ends up happening is that they will write a very detailed response, which is some lawyer generally analyzing the case from the beginning to end, stating why they didn't otherwise commit bad faith, and why they fully and fairly and reasonably investigated the claim, and how they didn't violate Florida statute or the bad faith statute or anything else.
They stick to their guns.
And they should be put on a pedestal because they're the greatest insurance company in the world.
Right.
However, that letter in and of itself doesn't cure the violation. So I'm still authorized, once the case, at least the initial case, is resolved, from being able to sue them for bad faith for their conduct, because they did not cure the bad faith conduct that they engaged in prior to the 60 days. The letter is what they call, well, let me explain it this way. If they don't write a letter, it's presumed that they've committed bad faith. If they do write a letter, a response, then it's considered a rebuttable presumption that they didn't commit bad faith, meaning they have the ability to refute the fact that there was no bad faith. But when I used to be a defense lawyer and I used to represent the insurance companies, I can tell you there's a few defendants you never want to be representing in court. And one is a nursing home who I used to also represent, because nobody wants to say to a family, right, I'm terribly sorry that your loved one died or got a decubitus ulcer, and there was, we really could have.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, man. There we go. Thank God.
Jeez.
We were rolling, man. I coughed. I thought it was because I coughed.
No. Are we paused right now?
No, we're not paused. We're live as hell.
You know what happened there? Is
what?
The phone got so hot that it said emergency.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because I had it sitting on the computer, and
damn iPhones, man. That's why you gotta switch to the dark side, I guess, and get yourself one of these, baby.
What is that?
I don't know. It's not an iPhone. It's the other one, the Galaxy.
Fair enough.
Dude, we were rolling, man.
Yeah, well, we were moving. That's how we do stuff, man. We get shit done.
Hell yeah, baby.
That's the only way to do stuff.
What was I going to ask you? There was a question I was going to ask you.
Well, what I was saying, and I don't know where I got cut off, is more or less the if we're still live, right?
Live and live.
Live and fly. Is that the civil remedy notice, as I was saying before, the jury is still out as to whether a public adjuster can file one or not.
I didn't even know the jury was out about that. Well, that's pretty cool.
They've been out a very long time, because no one has ever answered that question conclusively. Some consider it the unauthorized practice of law, and others say that it's not. But if you have a relationship with an attorney, And he could potentially file that on behalf of an insured if the insured authorizes him to do so, and that might provide additional assistance to you potentially in getting a case resolved, especially if you think that the actions or inactions of the insurance company are really outrageous and really amount to purposeful denial, delay, and improper defenses.
All right, so I guess let's get to the nuts and bolts of it. Why is it important to accept a good, no, that's not the question. Why is it important for a public adjuster to do their freaking job, right? Before you getting that claim? Like, what are some of the things that a public adjuster should do throughout the life of a claim? Obviously to get the claim paid and do the best service possible. But in the case that a claim does get denied, underpaid, delayed, whatever it is, and we need to take this thing to litigation, what are some of the things that a public adjuster should do throughout the life of the claim to really set it up nicely?
Well, like I told you a long time ago, and I continue to tell you,
yes, sir.
And I will tell any public adjuster, is that on some level, you should have righteous indignation for the concept of...
What is that?
That's the concept of being really pissed off, because an insurance company doesn't get to have the ability to take your money and say they're going to provide you with a service, give you a piece of the rock, an umbrella, being in good hands, whatever the case may be, and then at the same time decide that it can sit there and allow an insured to sit in their home or commercial property staring day in and day out at unrepaired covered damages, and giving an insurance company 90 days to make a determination. If a pipe is broken, what on earth do you need 90 days to be able to investigate, when all you need to do is either look at the insured's plumbing evaluation or have your own plumber come out? And how long is that possibly going to take? And how long, even after the plumber makes his evaluation from the insurance company relative to the cast iron drain lines, does it take for an insurance company to analyze that single page report? It's broken, it's not broken, we can agree, we can disagree, whatever the case may be. Why does it take 90 days? So when I this indignation, my viewpoint is that a public adjuster should have the same sort of viewpoint, which is it's not right, it's not fair, and we're not going to take it. And the reason we're not going to take it is because we have an obligation to represent our client. And the best way that we can represent our client is by getting in the insurance company's face and saying to them, what are you doing to take care of your policyholder? They pay you money and they're suffering because of your conduct. And so I say, and I tell you, and I tell every public adjuster, is write those emails and get it in the insurance company's face, which is, listen, the loss happened on this day, it was reported on that day, we provided you with our estimate on this day and sworn proof of loss, and we want you to come out and inspect the loss. How come you haven't done so? Is there anything else that you need? Is there anything else that you want? Here's everything on a silver platter for you. We'll give you another 5 days. We'll give you another 10 days. If you want to have a plumbing inspection, send your plumber out. What are you doing, Mr. or Mrs. Insurance Company Adjuster, to make sure that my client's claim is properly evaluated and paid? Because I'm just sitting here waiting for you to do the right thing, and so is my client, and we're getting tired of sitting here and waiting, which is why this whole 90 days is sort of a farce.
It's ridiculous.
It really isn't 90 days. It's just a penalty statute, meaning that if they don't do what they're supposed to do within 90 days, they are supposed to pay interest on the value of the claim that they improperly denied or underpaid. That's all it necessarily means. And so when you ask the question about why do I want things to be done in a certain way so that they are presented on a silver platter, so that it helps me and it helps you and it helps the client. Obviously, what we just talked about is that it's clearly documenting your file, which is important. Right. It's clearly getting in the insurance company's face and making sure that the insurance company knows that you're serious and that you should be taken seriously, and that you're not somebody to be messed around with, because they've messed around with you in the past, and they know that if you don't do insurance company the right thing in the right amount of time, they're going to get a phone call from Mr. Lawyer or a lawsuit in a very short amount of time, and then they're going to be paying those double, triple, quadruple damages that they could have otherwise resolved the case for far less if they didn't act in such a negligent and inappropriate manner. So to do that sort of thing and to be able to get attorney's fees and costs, which is the reason why not only is it serving the benefit of helping the case go forward and making sure that you're properly doing your job. But when we get to court, one of the things that the court wants to know, if we ever get to a fee hearing, is what efforts did the insured or his public adjuster take in order to get this case resolved? And or did you just file a lawsuit because you wanted to try and get additional attorney's fees and costs? And if I can go and show a court, hey judge, look, on February 2nd, here's a letter from the public adjuster asking for a coverage determination and a undisputed payment. Here's another request on February 10th. Here's another request on February 27th. Whatever the case may be, and it's agent, public adjuster is trying to do what they can do to try and get the case moving and along. And because there's no response, including those 14 days that they're supposed to respond to communications from you, they weren't doing their job. So it wasn't a concept of us just running to the courthouse to file a lawsuit. It was a concept of you didn't do what you were supposed to do, and that's why we're here.
I was laughing because I get that question a lot. How long, Vince, how long do these insurance companies have to respond? They're not responding, this and that. And I tell them, I said, the claim should be paid immediately. I always tell the adjusters that they need 4 things. At least in the beginning, you want to have 4 things. If you can provide them with your LOR, your estimate, your expert documentation, if it's a plumbing repair, roofing repair, whatever it is, and any kind of mitigation documentation, whether it's a dry out or a tarp or whatever it is, you can provide those 4 things right off the bat. That's it. They're on notice. We've provided you everything that you need. We've taken the recorded statement. We've done the initial inspection already. What the hell else do you need to solve this, to make a coverage decision and make a payment on this claim? Is there anything else that you need? If not, we'll make a payment by the end of the week. And, if they don't respond within a week, that's it. The next email is going to go out. And unless you send a plumber out, unless you're sending somebody out, we don't want to waste any more time because like you said, we've got a client here who's staring at the damaged cabinets, the hole in the roof and in their ceiling. And they got to look at this crap every day. And the insurance adjuster who's sitting in the desk, it was not his fault because, he's not living in the house. So he's not going through what that person is going through, but it's up to us to remind them that these people are going through what they're going through because, it sucks to live in this house and having to live through that. So I like to make sure that I remind them every single email that, by the way, every day that you're taking to make a payment or make a coverage decision on this claim, the client is living like this, and that. Please see attached photos of what exactly that they're living with so that maybe you can make a payment and let these people move on with their lives.
The student has become the master.
Yes. You taught me well, my friend. You taught me well. So what was I going to say? So, is there any other specific things besides follow-up? POL. This is a big question that I always have. Should we provide the POL at the beginning of the claim? Should we wait until it goes to litigation? Should we wait until they request it? I know the POL is something to me that has never made any sense. How the fact that a single document, a single freaking piece of paper could weigh so heavy in the litigation process if you don't provide it, it doesn't make any sense to me. But that's whatever. Maybe that's another conversation for another day. Explain to me, when should we provide the POL? How soon should we provide it? And the consequences of not providing it.
Wow, that's a lot of questions in one. I'll do my best to try and answer them.
Keep it short, David. I know how you could talk.
I know. I say a whole lot of nothing too. In any event, yeah. So sworn proofs of loss have been around for as long as insurance policies have been around, and the reason I believe that the insurance companies include them in the policies is simply because they want the insured to have a sworn account of what the value of their damages are, and as it's considered a post-loss compliance issue, it needs to be complied with. And for all of the new public adjusters, be very, very careful as it relates to State Farm in particular, because State Farm has a provision, which is crazy in my opinion, that you actually have to provide the sworn proof of loss within 60 days of the date of loss. Meaning right. That if you had the loss on one particular day, but you didn't report it for, say, 5, 10, 15 days later, or whatever the case may be, the time was already ticking, okay? Once you report it, you think State Farm or somebody is going to necessarily give you a sworn proof of loss and say, hey, you have this policy provision that you need to comply with, and you need to have an accounting of your damages within 60 days. And
Jesus, David. It's this wireless connection. David, you're gone. All right, you're back. Okay.
Oftentimes, the person's not represented by a public adjuster from the outset, and they don't even know what a sworn proof of loss is, and they don't know what they're supposed to do or not do. So be mindful of any State Farm cases that you need to get that sworn proof of loss within 60 days. There are other carriers that have that same requirement. I think Castle Key may be one of them, and others. So you want to get a copy of that insurance policy, because you as a public adjuster don't want to be sitting there with a requirement to produce a sworn proof of loss within 60 days of the date of loss, and you're holding on. Would say, I can't help that the office is calling. I'm declining.
Oh, that's what it is. Yeah.
If our technical difficulties didn't occur, we'd be on my laptop as opposed to my cell phone, and we'd be much better off. But here we are.
Good.
And so with that sworn proof of loss, you ask, how early should you provide it? I think if you're providing your estimate, you should be getting the sworn proof of loss in at the same time. There is no harm in you doing that, because you're complying with the policy, whether it's requested or not. Most insurance policies say that you are to give us a sworn proof of loss within 60 days of our request.
Right.
So it isn't necessarily a post-loss compliance duty, meaning you have to give a sworn proof of loss, but rather a request once made has to be complied with. Then it becomes a post-loss compliance issue. And there is very draconian law in my mind, which does stand for the proposition that if you do not give sworn proofs of loss after they're requested in a particular amount of time, courts can, and sometimes do, bar coverage on that basis alone, which I think is a very improper and there's a lot of words I could use to describe it. Sucks. I'd rather
it sucks.
But it's just wrong, because like I said, it's a piece of paper, and that piece of paper didn't change the value of your estimate, which is why I'm saying to you, put the estimate amount, help the insured fill out a sworn proof of loss, get that in as quickly as possible. And it has a dual purpose on top of the concept and the fact that whether or not that's requested or not. The insurance company, again, has additional obligations under the statutes to either pay or admit coverage for a claim within 30 days of a sworn proof of loss.
Right.
So that you've got a 90-day prompt payment statute, and then you got a 30-day sworn proof of loss statute. And so anything that continues to mark off boxes that the insurance company didn't do what it was supposed to do, which is, I gave you the sworn proof of loss. Some public adjusters will do this, and the insurance companies will write you some ridiculous letter like, we never asked you for this, and we're not accepting or rejecting your sworn proof of loss.
That's my favorite.
Because we didn't ask you for it. And you're like, well, you didn't need to ask me for it. Yeah, you could ask me for it, but I just chose to give it to you now anyways. So you choose to do with whatever you want to choose to do with it. However, the statute didn't change. You still got to do something within 30 days. You're going to do it or you're not going to do it.
Right. Yeah, I'd be lying if I told you it hasn't happened to me. I'd be lying if I told you it hasn't happened to me. And it was a case killer. It didn't go well.
Wasn't one of mine.
Wasn't one of yours. No, it was not. Yeah, it didn't go well. And I just got so upset. And to this day, to me, it doesn't make any sense. But it is what it is, right? That's just what it says.
Well, I mean, I think that courts are working hard to make sure that insureds don't have that sort of result anymore, and giving the benefit of the doubt and the ability to potentially cure that defect if it occurs in litigation. However, you don't want to be on the receiving end of this as a new public adjuster. You don't want to be ever facing a question from somebody saying, why didn't you submit a sworn proof of loss? What prevented you from doing so? Was it just that you couldn't get someone to notarize a piece of paper for you? You've already done the hard work. You've scoped the loss. You've created your Xactimate or SimSol estimate.
The POL is the easiest part.
You got everything done. What is your harm in not submitting it, and getting that clock ticking?
It's 5 minutes to put that thing together.
I don't know. I don't often find myself involved in preparing sworn proofs of loss, but they don't take a whole lot of time, and they can only really help you. And the truth of the matter is that people sometimes are of the opinion, well, if I do this, am I going to be able to change my damage value. Well, yeah. I mean, yes, it's the sworn account from the insured. And
that was going to be my next question.
They don't have the knowledge, background, or training to be able to put the numbers in there anyways. So they testify, for the most part, that that this is a number that's ultimately put into the sworn proof of loss by the public adjuster, and that they're relying upon that number because the public adjuster is the expert with the license to be able to come up with that number. Now, if for some reason the public adjuster believes and does further evaluation or investigation of the loss and determines that the thing should be more, there's no harm in revising a sworn proof of loss and saying that my damage evaluation has increased for whatever reason.
That's good to know.
If they get a general contractor involved and they ultimately have a new damage estimate that is in excess of the public adjusters, you can change the sworn proof of loss. Where it becomes a little more dicey, though, is a situation where the public adjuster has prepared a sworn proof of loss, and now you want to take things out of it because you've already had the client swear, essentially as though they were under oath, that these are truly their damages. And when taking things out of the estimate, the question would be, is why were they in the estimate to begin with? And of course, then
we don't got to worry about that.
I made a mistake.
We don't have to worry about that.
So you be careful.
But I think it's good. That's good to say that it could be more, because I think a lot of times, a lot of public adjusters and even the clients, since they have to go and get it notarized, when something has to get notarized, all of a sudden it's like the real deal. I think it's good to know to all public adjusters that it could end up being more. That's not necessarily the end all be all. That, don't worry about it. Let's just get this thing, especially since the paper carries so much weight. People forget about it.
Well, I have even a new, let's see what a new development in the law, which happened as a result of the new online technology which exists today, that in January of 2020 this year, the courts are now authorizing remote online notarizations.
I heard about that.
So you as a public adjuster can tell the client, although there would be a fee associated with it, you may want to incur it as the public adjuster, or you may have your client incur it, and you give them the notary's contact information, and you leave that sworn proof, and they go through the online notarization. They never even have to leave their house. They don't have to go to a bank. They don't have to delay. They literally could get it notarized right then and there by an online notary.
Yeah, they're doing that with real estate a lot right now. A lot of the real estate transactions that they're doing online notaries.
Yeah, well, it's helping in my practice as well, because when we're dealing with answers to interrogatories, some of my clients are elderly and some of them are working full time and don't have the ability to come into my office, which of course they're welcome to do. Some of them don't have notaries in their office, and it's just a matter of convenience at this point. What can we do to make people's lives easier and better? And I think that the courts have now caught up with the trend of the ability to do things remotely. Like now, today with the coronavirus, the courts have essentially closed. Jury trials are probably done for the rest of the year. And hearings are still going forward in some courts, but they're doing it through technology like this, with the Zoom and telephonic meetings.
Did you see that article I posted about the judge being pissed off that lawyers were showing up to their hearings in pajamas and in their bed, and they'd put the Zoom background so that you couldn't tell that they were like in their bedroom?
I had a hearing this morning where the judge complimented me on my dress. I dressed in a suit this morning.
Yeah, but just from the waist up, right? Come on.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
My opposing counsel was also wearing gym shorts, as he told me. He didn't show me, so he just told me.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's the new day and age that we're in right now. Well, let's get into the corona then. Let's talk about that.
COVID beer or something else? No.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool. Actually, I don't have any beer next to me. Right? Exactly. I guess. What was I going to say? Loss of business income. This seems to be a very hot topic. To me, my opinion is it doesn't seem like we've really gotten many answers into how this is going to turn out. I think that there's a lot of public adjusters that I see on social media that are are signing up these claims left and right with people who've got the loss of business income coverage, and I guess sort of hoping for the best. I don't know.
Yeah.
What have you seen?
That's pretty much what's happening, and some attorneys are also advertising on television and radio.
Yeah, I see it everywhere.
Interruption claims. In fact, my understanding, a class action lawsuit just got filed, although I don't know how or why it would be certified against certain insurance companies for loss of business income. And these claims are known as business interruption claims. And for the most part, they're only going to exist in commercial policies. And not every commercial policy is going to contain a business interruption. And most of these policies do have specific exclusions, which will otherwise exclude pandemics, viruses, contagions, pollution, civil authority. Certainly, we'll be at the Farber Law Firm investigating these cases on a case-by-case basis and evaluating the insurance policy to see if there's something we can do to help these folks in this time of need, because clearly they need some relief and assistance.
Right.
The federal government has even gone so far as to say that they believe that the insurance company should be paying these risks, in some cases, irrespective of the exclusions that are within the policy. So it's kind of an interesting dilemma in the sense that people have private contracts with insurance companies, and we live in a country where private contracts are not supposed to be manipulated or adjusted or rewritten by the courts or the government to include or exclude certain elements of damage or perils, in this case, the coronavirus. So the question really will be is the government going to step in to give us some additional ammunition to take some of the insurance companies down?
Well, that's the part that gets me. I find it hard to believe when you see Trump getting up and talking about, yeah, the insurance companies are going to pay. They're going to pay. They have to pay. They have to pay. I mean, if I flip the roles and I put it in reverse, and I had a solid contract on there that says that I specifically do not pay for a pandemic or certain things, I mean, I'm going to probably try to stick to my guns. So I can't really see how the government would do that. However, I heard there's governmental action or civil authority or something like that there may be some ways around it, or maybe some stuff.
That's why I'm saying, for the most part, every one of these policies have to be looked at with a fine tooth comb, in the sense that they are all written differently. Since they're commercial policies, for the most part, they're going to vary widely for the most part, and they're going to have certain things that are going to be excluded and certain things that will be covered. And the civil authority aspect of things are, there are certain aspects of people's businesses being closed that have technically nothing to do with coronavirus, in the sense that their property was not contaminated with coronavirus. Their employees didn't get coronavirus. They literally lost their ability to conduct business because the government shut them down. So one of the interplays of whether or not there's going to be coverage or not is the loss really coronavirus, or is it a civil authority, in the sense that they're telling you to shut down because of some contagion that people may contract and give to other people. And so that's going to be another thing that's going to have to be looked at very carefully as to whether there's coverage for business interruption insurance. And then there's some policies that actually do specifically cover pandemics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there are some other policies which are very robust, in the sense that they're trade distribution policies. You know, insurance companies are not stupid, as we all know. They make their money by doing actuaries, in the sense that they can determine in life insurance or whatever the case may be, how many years somebody's going to potentially live based upon their comorbidities. Those issues or maladies that would otherwise cause problems for a person, COPD, and that sort of thing. And then they can actualize what they believe the premium should be based upon someone's health. Well, the same thing goes for them determining how much they're going to have to pay out in a given amount of time based upon losses. How many people have really cast iron drain lines within a particular jurisdiction? What happens if you put a cap or a limit on those losses? Or how many hurricanes are potentially going to get hit within a particular year? And what could be our total outlay as a result of that? So the insurance companies have been around for 100 years plus, and they've lived through pandemics, and they've lived through nuclear threat and things like that. And that's why those things exist within the policy, which we never even contemplated before, because it wasn't really an issue. But now it is.
I've been advising business owners to just keep track of everything, especially the ones that've got, decent coverages and they've got the loss of business income. It's just to keep track of all their records, especially for I'd say the last 3 years at least. So if they do decide to file a claim, at least that they've got something to stand on. They could just sort of compare the numbers.
Well, I would take it even a step further in the sense that it would be my recommendation that you as a public adjuster or me as an attorney, whether we can necessarily help the person or not, that we actually put the claim in, because realistically there is in most policies a prompt notice requirement that specificates that you need to tell the insurance company within a reasonable amount of time as to the nature of the loss and that you sustained a loss. And obviously it will give the insurance company a leg up in terms of starting to, quote, investigate your claim, even though your damages are ongoing. Right now, we don't necessarily know what anyone's true ultimate damages are going to be because they haven't reopened anything, and they may go on for a long period of time. But business interruption is not the type of coverage which will provide you with limits as much as, say, the amount of your building. There are, in business interruption policies, certain ways that these coverages are stated, in the sense that they may only provide $100,000 worth of coverage. And it may only be distributed in certain ways, like 1/4 a month, or 2/4, or whatever the case may be over a certain amount of time, which may or may not get a business back on its feet. But not putting the claim in will potentially cause you detriment because you have the claim regardless. And whether or not the insurance company pays it or not pays it, and although I'm not giving any tax advice, I can certainly tell you that your accountant is going to be able to need that information when and if you're filing taxes at the end of the year as to what your losses were, and perhaps there'll be some forgiveness that way from the federal government.
So file it, people. That's what David's saying.
That's
file
what I'm saying in about 1,000 words or less.
Don't waste any time. Get it in, especially if they got coverage. I got a call. I got a call from a local business here in Tampa who found me online. Hey, what do you think I should do about this loss of business income? I said, you got coverage? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, get it in there. Get it in there as soon as possible.
I've reviewed actually a couple policies already, not for Florida insureds, but Texas insureds.
Okay.
And they would cover this loss. That's
nice.
why I'm saying, contact the agent, get a copy of the policy, review it yourself, get it over to me or whatever the case may be, or whatever attorney your folks are working with, and say, what do you think here? But again, not putting in the claim, it's kind of like asking a girl out, right? You can ask, 100 times, maybe you'll get a yes. But
what did Wayne Gretzky say?
You ain't never going to go on a date.
What did Wayne Gretzky say? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
That's probably a much better way to say it. It reminds me of a joke that a guy was complaining. He says, God, I'm a pious man. I go to church and I work really hard and I hold you in the highest regard. And I'm begging you to help me win the lottery. I really need the money. Would you please help me? And so every Sunday or Saturday or wherever, religion you're subscribing to, he would go to church, temple, whatever, and he'd pray and he'd say, and eventually he got angry and he's like, God, you've forsaken me. You haven't done what I needed you to do. I thought you would do it. And God yells down at him, you got to buy a ticket,
Yeah, exactly.
It's so it's not that great of a joke. But
no, that makes sense.
It is what it is. So, give it a shot. What do you have to lose?
Yeah, that's good advice. What else? how can since we talked about what sort of public adjusters need to do to make sure that they don't slip up, provide the POL, follow up on a weekly basis, get the insurance company all the documentation as soon as possible, and just do whatever you have to do to set the claim up, I guess, just to make sure to keep them on warning. What are some of your nightmare scenarios, and give me a nightmare story that you've had that a public adjuster just completely fucked it all up? Do you have any of those?
Well, I mean, certainly I've had public adjusters mess things up, but there are more warning stories associated with things that can get public adjusters in trouble that either the public adjuster has brought upon himself or has taken the insured assistance in potentially perpetrating a fraud.
Well, I guess if anything, it's the client that usually screws up the claim. If anything, right? A public adjuster only helps, actually.
Well, there have been some bad public adjusters that have done some really, really shady things. The one question that you as a public adjuster should always be wary of is if an insured asks you what the loss should be, meaning they don't know and they need you to tell them what it is. That can be potentially a red flag that somebody's looking to do something that they shouldn't otherwise do. Tell me what I need to say to make sure that this thing is covered. The facts are what the facts are. And the loss happened the way that the loss happened. And just like I tell all my clients, and I would tell all the public adjusters, I can work with any set of facts. What I can't work with are lies or exaggerations. Right. Lies or exaggerations is considered insurance fraud. But some public adjusters have unfortunately either gone to a client's home and purposely caused more damage, or tried to make damage seem more like the cause of loss for which they said it was, or invented a loss, a fire, or back in the day, dropping things on the ground and breaking floors.
Oh, the old drop object claim.
Yeah. And then they get the insured to participate in this fraud. And when that sort of thing happens, people go to jail. And obviously that is part of the reason why the insurance company is always of the opinion that perhaps someone is committing fraud as it relates to an insurance claim, and they're not so willing in some respects to break out their checkbook. But from my perspective, a public adjuster, most of the public adjusters that I've worked with, they're good, honorable people who are trying to do the right thing. And they haven't really done anything that's been tremendously problematic in my 20 years of representing folks.
Yeah, that's what I tell. I get a question like that too by public adjusters, like, "Oh, I just don't want to screw it up. I don't want to screw it up." And I'm like, you can't. I mean, you really can't screw it up. Well, you're gone again.
No, I'll be back in a second.
I tell them, I said, you can't really screw it up. I mean, if you don't provide the POL, you're screwing it up. If you just let the claim it forgets itself and you don't follow up with the insurance company, it just drags on, that's not good either. But then that looks bad on the insurance company's part too. I just tell them, I'm like, there's no reason to invent anything. There's no reason to do anything like that or any kind of fraud, because at the end of the day, there's claims out there. I mean, as much as I do, there's claims all over the place, man, especially Miami, especially Florida, especially all over the country, which it's fun to see now when I'm doing all this social media stuff that there's public adjusters all over, man, all over the country, from Florida to Texas to Wyoming, Wisconsin, and all these tiny little towns where I'm just like, all right, cool. I mean, the people have never heard of what public adjusters are, but yeah, it seems to me like it's a growing industry.
Well, you guys have a lot of great aspects to your job.
You've always told me that. You're just like, God, sometimes I wish I was just a public adjuster.
Well, we have a lot more rules in terms of what we can say or what we can do or how we can get business. You have less rules, but you also have the ability, if you wanted to be a storm chaser, meaning you hear about a particular locale that just got smashed with hail, or a tornado or flood or hurricane, whatever the case may be.
That hurricane storm chasing, man, that rubbed me the wrong way. When I went to the Panhandle for Michael, I mean, all I ended up doing was help people put tarps up. I help people take stuff out of their house, and I didn't even I mean, if it came up in conversation, I told him what I did for a living and really was the reason why I was there. But when you go to one of these places that have just been leveled by one of these bad storms, it's nasty. I was talking to somebody the other day, something similar, where he's got like for the fires, he's got like the 911 emergency calls and all that stuff. And he's gone to a couple of these, and there's all these other public adjusters out there. And there's all these other water mitigation companies out there. And he calls me and he's just like, hey, what should I do in this situation? How can I separate myself from the rest? I told him, I said, get a good referral instead of just being out there competing against all these other guys. Because I told him, I said, frankly, I told him about Hurricane Michael. I said, I couldn't even see myself doing that because, and this is not, I don't want to knock any public adjuster that does it. It's just that I just feel so terrible. I mean, especially even after a fire, they've lost their house and you're out there asking them to sign a contract. You know, it could be it's just a dicey situation. I feel bad for when these people go through that.
Vince, you're one of the good guys. I mean, and we have to remember that as public adjusters and attorneys in this area, and I also do personal injury too, we are part of a very noble and honorable profession that can help a lot of people and give a voice to people, because without us, the insurance companies would otherwise run over people and tremendously take advantage of them. People complain about lawyers all the time, but we're the first people run to when a problem arises because they know that we're going to fix it for them. And people forget about that because there's a lot of misinformation out there saying,
personal injury attorney, ambulance chaser.
Well, sure, that's one of them. But then the other one is that, you know, these AOBs and these attorneys and these public adjusters, they're the reasons why your insurance rates are so high, because, you know, they're the ones who are causing so much problems. And really, you have to ask yourself a question. Just like in the case where they say ambulance chasers or whatever the case may be, nobody's paying monies on things that they don't generally owe. So if you're, as an insurance company, having to pay more out, whether it be in attorney's fees or indemnity or whatever the case may be, it's because
that's what's owed.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
You have an ability to fight and you have an ability to win, and don't tell me that you don't have the resources in which to do so. You're purposely screwing people on some level, and for your rates to go up, you know, you look at it from this perspective, is that rates go up in proportion to claims because insurance companies are paying out more. But insurance companies are paying out more because of the nature of the loss that they insure. If they don't like the nature of the loss that they insure, then don't insure the property to begin with. You know, there's so many options to them. And people, I'm sure your new public adjusters know, but people's rates for their insurance policies do not go up because of the claims that they're putting in. That's why we have insurance. They go up because those rate increases are approved by the department. And when that sort of thing happens, we all get screwed, but guess who's still making record profits?
They are. What's fraud, right? Because we were just talking about fraud. Is fraud, inventing a claim? Obviously, but I also I got a claim right now where they just paid out, I don't know, let's just say $10,000. And in the email, he's like, I'm willing to pay you an additional $6,000 in exchange for a release. And I'm like, wait, motherfucker, like, why didn't you just pay that in the beginning? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's fraud? Inventing a claim, or is it actually paying $10,000 on a loss that's actually worth $20,000? You know, it's like, come on, man. I think it's far worse than that, to be honest with you, because first of all, releases really shouldn't be provided to public adjusters, and then public. You don't like those things. Well, it's bad faith for a insurance company to give a release that extinguishes the entirety of the claim. We have a case like that now, and that they're not allowed to do that, because an insurance policy is a living, breathing document in the sense that just because you have a claim doesn't foreclose the claim simply because the insurance company pays you money. You're allowed to, in a normal situation, go back to them and say, I had ALE and it was incurred, and here's another $10,000 or $20,000. You need to pay me these ALEs. But if you're signing a release, you're potentially extinguishing that claim. And that's a major problem, both for you as the public adjuster and the insured, who didn't agree to otherwise close out their claim
simply because the insurance company is doing what it's required to do under the policy, which is to pay a damn loss.
Right.
You know, that's their job. They're not in a situation where they're not required to pay. So why should they? Where in the policy does it say that there, as part of payment, that you're supposed to sign a release? Doesn't say that anywhere in there.
Sure. But
And
they
it
love it when
shouldn't.
you do. They love it when you do, because then they
Of
know
course they do.
it's over.
I don't know. And those are certain situations where you should be consulting with an attorney.
Sure. Sure. I had a guy the other day who he comes in, seems nice in the beginning, and he's taking his measurements, and he's like, you know, I don't understand why any client would even hire a public adjuster when the claim gets paid fine. And I'm like, dude, why would we even exist if you guys actually paid the way you're supposed to pay? I said, number one. And what I like to tell him is that I like you, I worked for the other side. I worked for State Farm for 1.5 years. And when you're on, I don't know if you felt like that, but I'm sure when you were on the other side, you defend your side. You see it from like a what is it, horse blinders. Right. Yeah. So you just think, yeah, what you're doing is right, and you're defending and this and that, and you're paying up to the way it's supposed to pay. But then when you go and you take a look at the other side of the fence, you're like, whoa, okay, look what's happening here. I didn't notice this, but this is like a real thing.
For sure. Look, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, I drank the Kool-Aid when I was a defense lawyer.
So did I.
And you had to, believe in your side. And there were a lot of times where I was like, public adjusters, man, they must all be frauds. I mean, how could they have an estimate that's 10 times my adjuster's estimate? How is that even possible?
Right.
And then we'd start going to appraisal, and it'd come back like not 10 times, but maybe 5 or 6 times. And I'd be like, how the hell is that even possible? I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because, you want to believe on some level that if an insurance company is making a, quote, mistake, that the mistake is going to be 10%, 20%. I mean, I've turned cases into thousands of percent. I'm not a mathematician to be able to tell you how much I've turned something
thousands
denied or underpaid into how much more money afterwards. How is that a mistake? And they did so voluntarily. And sometimes it's even in a short amount of time after I file a lawsuit, which really makes you wonder, like you said, if you're willing to pay me 10 and now you're willing to pay me another 6, but with a release, you're almost paying me double on some level, a third.
You were trying to commit fraud in a way. Yeah, I mean, I know you may not like that word, but you were trying to screw us over somehow, some way. What is it they say? They say like 80% of the claims never go contested. The other one is depreciation. Like 95% of claims never even get the depreciation released after the person finishes the work. I mean, it's just crazy.
Because there's a lack of education, and that's why I'm so proud of what you're doing.
That's why I started this thing.
And that's impressive. I mean, like, people need to know, and they need to make sure to hold their insurance company accountable, however they do it, whether they do it through us or whether they do it through themselves or whatever the case may be. But the one thing that needs to stop happening is people not being treated fairly for a product that they bought, that they anticipated was going to be there for them in their time of need. Enough's enough.
Well, if you ask me, it starts with the agent.
Yeah, that's another problem.
Jesus. I mean, I can't. When I walk into these houses and these people have just had 2 inches of water in their house, and I look at their policy and I'm like, you got no water damage coverage. They're like, what? Or you've got $10,000 limit. You've got about $100,000 loss here, but they're not going to pay you more than 10. And I'm just like, why in the hell are these goddamn agents selling these? And that's why I started the channel. Wasn't for public adjusters. This turned into a public adjuster thing, but I started it literally because I got sick and tired of running into these goddamn claims with freaking $10,000 water damage limits, or contractor right to repair, or just complete exclusions on water damage, when 95% of our claims, David, are water damage claims. And it's like, they know what they're doing.
The 3 big ones are fire, hurricane, and water. If you're going to get hit, everything else is going to be relatively small. But if you're going to get hit with one of those 3, it's generally going to be pretty large. And it's crazy to have a limits of insurance of, say, 100, 200, 300, 500, whatever the case may be, and then have a water loss and have your beautiful floors and kitchen and everything destroyed and only have $10,000 of coverage.
Crazy.
And the Department of Insurance has apparently allowed them to get away with it in some respects. But I file on these cases daily, weekly, to argue various different theories in the law to try and overcome these 10,000.
Yeah, but they're not easy. They're not easy.
Nothing's easy in this world, but certainly not that, because they're doing their very best to make sure that people aren't able to recover. In fact, I had a discussion today with a lawyer on the other side where they had denied the loss, and they said that it's not covered because they have a water damage exclusion. I was like, okay, let me take a look at the water damage exclusion. I looked at it pretty carefully. I'm like, nah. I'm like, this water damage exclusion does not exclude this loss. And here's my lawsuit. And I filed 2 separate lawsuits because they had 2 separate losses. And the insurance company, even though they denied the claim, come out with an offer of $20,000 on each. And I'm like, that's after I just filed the lawsuit. And but it's still not covered according to them. And I said, really? I said, well, why don't we take a look at your exclusion? And there's this certain thing, it's called grammar and punctuation. I'm like, had you had done this, that, and the other thing, it might have been excluded. But because you didn't, guess what, buddy? Your exclusion doesn't apply. And all of a sudden, ding, 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 light goes off in his head. And I say to them, think about it this way. I may have caught you with your pants down, but, you need to do what's right and pay my client what they're owed, period. I'm not looking to make a mountain out of a molehill here. But this is why it's so important, as we started off this conversation, with making sure you get the policy, making sure that you review the policy. And if you have any questions about the policy, getting an attorney involved to further analyze it to help you to determine whether or not the loss is covered or not, or whether that $10,000 cap or that water damage exclusion can be worked around. There are sometimes possibilities to do so.
Yeah, I will say for all public adjusters listening is to try to have a good relationship with an attorney that you could call and you could ask them, because at the end of the day, although I know we are policy experts, you guys just read so fast. You guys are capable of reading fast. And I think it's also good for attorneys to know, don't be that attorney that is just hard to get a hold of. You know what I mean? Just don't be that, I never liked that when I first started. When I met you, thankfully you're, like I said, very accessible. And I think all attorneys should take after you in regards to, especially with their public adjusters, because let's face it, it's good for you to have a good relationship with public adjusters in your industry. So
it certainly is. But it's interesting because I learned this as well. I graduated from the University of Florida with a degree in insurance. Well, I went to UM too. So I graduated with a degree in insurance and finance, and I got my license to be able to sell insurance. And my father was an insurance agent for 30 something years. So every time even I had a question as an attorney, I'd say, Dad, what do you think about this sort of issue? And he goes, oh, definitely, absolutely not covered. And I'd be like, where do you come up with that? I'm like, why do you say that? He's like, well, that's what they taught us in school. I'll even show you in the books. Because who do you think is teaching them about what's covered or not covered within an insurance policy?
Sure.
But rather the insurance companies that are selling the products that are being sold to their customers. But
exactly.
What my father used to say is that, listen, my job as the insurance agent, whether it's good on my record or not, is to make sure my client gets paid. I don't want to be sitting there in a situation where I sold them a product and then they're not getting paid. So I want you to find these potential, loopholes or ambiguous aspects of policies, because I want to make sure that these people are getting what they paid for, which is insurance to cover them in their time of need. And so when you talk to some of these adjusters who are not adjusters, agents, they're actually incentivized by their loss ratio, meaning they don't want people to put in claims. That's a problem for them. The amount
you
of
said
claims,
it. You said it, not me.
Yeah, with the amount of claims that get filed under their whatever. Some of them get bonuses from insurance companies to go on special trips. There's all sorts of interesting things that work here that are beyond my pay grade. I am familiar with some of them, and a lot of what I say is based upon my opinion and just being out in the field for a very long time. But if you start peeling back the layers, you never know what you're going to find.
Again, I guess we're biased. We're on our side. We see what we see, and it's disgusting. you know?
Sometimes, like I said, not all insurance companies are bad, and some of them do the right thing, and they do respond to their insurance their insurance requests.
They've created a monster.
But for the most part, everything that you and I have seen, for the most part, required our involvement. How many cases have you walked? I mean, I've walked away from a few saying, "Listen, you're premature. Listen, right at this point in time, you got to give your insurance company a little more time to do what they need to do. If they do not do the right thing, you can come back and talk to me. But I'm not going to take your money or start trying to assist you with your insurance companies early on simply to cause more problems for you than you think, because once you get a lawyer involved sometimes and you send a letter in pre-suit and they lawyer up back, and with all these pre-suit compliance issues, you asked me a question before, what's a nightmare about a public adjuster that can go wrong for a public adjuster and for their client? Not complying with post-loss obligations. It's very simple. You need to take a look at that letter that's written by the insurance company. It's going to have, I want you to provide numbers 1 through 10, 15, whatever the case may be. You need to respond as quickly as possible, because then it gets back to, I've given you everything, I've done everything. Why aren't you doing what you're supposed to do? As it relates to number 1, attached. Number 2, that's what exist. I do. Number 3, not in my client's possession, might be in possession of someone who my client has no custody or control over to be able to produce whatever. Doesn't exist. You want a recorded statement? Please contact me for times and dates and available. I'll make my client available on the next 5, whatever. So at the end of the day, one of the arguments once I file a lawsuit is you didn't comply with your post-loss obligations because you didn't allow the insurance company to do that recorded statement that they asked for 4 months ago but never bothered to schedule. Or you never produced a document that we requested that they never followed up on, but then they offered you more money and then you took some of that money. And then later on, when you ask for more, now it's like, you didn't give us the document. Well, why did you give me more money before if the document was really important?
Absolutely.
Final statement. Go for it.
All I can say is, Vince, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this and be part of your journey to improve public adjusters, the practice of public adjusting, and otherwise getting great results for your clients. I'm honored to know you as a professional and as a friend. I look forward to many years to come of friendship and business relations. And for any of your public adjusters out there, should they need or want to contact me, they're certainly welcome to do so. Again, my name is David Farber, and I can be reached at 305-774-0134 or dfarber@dfarberlaw.com. Thanks, Vince.
All right, so we're closing this off as well. David, thank you very much for joining us on the Claims Game podcast. The first one, too, the first ever one that we've ever done. So that was pretty exciting. We've talked about some really good stuff, and I think it went very well. So we'll go on to the next one. We'll be doing another one in 1 month, interviewing someone else in the industry, and I'm sure that's going to go well as well. So keep following all our stuff. Check out the new site, commercialclaimsadvocate.com, where you could basically watch everything. You could rewatch this podcast and listen to this podcast, and you could hold on, give me a second. You could rewatch this podcast, and you could do everything online. Rewatch the podcast, look at the videos, look at the new blog that we've got, and just get in touch with me as well. So check it out, commercialclaimsadvocate.com. Looking forward to doing this again. David, again, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you later.